Welcome to the Extra Mile podcast for bar exam takers. My name is Jackson Mummy, and each week we'll be bringing you updated information about the bar exam and what you need to do in order to make the next bar exam your last bar exam. Ready to get started? Let's jump to it. A few years ago, I did a video series that I called Exam Peace. Two words that didn't really go together because for most folks, exam and peace, not the thing you typically think of. When you think of the exam, it's not peaceful, it's anything but. That series of videos got thousands of views and lots of comments, and I thought it was time to update it just a bit. And so today what I wanted to do was to go back and revisit some of those messages, particularly dealing with what happens right after the bar exam and the desire to talk about your results to do a post-mortem on them. What got me to thinking in the first place about exam peace was a poster that I got from a student many years ago after their bar exam. The statement on the poster said, "Peace. It does not mean to be in a place where there's no noise, trouble, or hard work. It means to be in the midst of those things and still be calm in your heart." Still be calm in your heart. That's pretty cool, isn't it? Now, I keep this particular poster in my office behind my computer so you can't see it, but it's a very useful reminder to me that peace never means a lack of trouble, a lack of challenge. And for those of you who have just finished taking your bar exam, certainly you experienced that. What peace really means, I think, is that in the midst of those difficulties and those challenges, that you remain in a good place. You're calm in your heart, you're calm in your brain, and in your mind as well. And so the first place that I wanted to talk about exam peace might seem like a strange starting point to you, but it's really predicated by where we are in the cycle of the year. And that is, what do you do after bar exam results come out? As I'm recording this, the exams are just now finishing up. And so we're in this period of a week or two after the exam that I would think of as a post-mortem time. That is, when people start replaying the exam in their minds, or they contact me as a mentor and they talk about or write about what went on. And you might be thinking I'd be talking about, at this point, how to achieve peace as you start your studies, because most of you that are going to be watching or listening to this certainly are in the mode of just beginning your studies for upcoming exams. We will get there, I promise, and you can check out the other videos in the Exam Peace series, and we'll link to those. But I thought today I'd work backwards just a bit and talk about what happens in terms of peace after the exam. Now, there's some things that I think are just routine and obvious, and that is that once the test is done, you can't affect the score. Thank you, Captain Obvious. We know that intellectually, but I can tell you that emotionally, that seems to not always be the case. There are plenty of people that replay the test over and over again in their mind, and sometimes in their mouths. They just keep talking about it. I have people who will call me right after the exam, some who email me, some who text me, some who post on our Facebook group. And then there are those who do all of that, and they incessantly bore down on anyone around them to talk about the test as though they can't get it out of their system, they can't purge it, and somehow talking about it will reassure them or change the outcome in some way as to what has happened. Once you've handed in your test sheets or sent your uplinks to ExamSoft and the examiners, there's nothing else that's going to happen. It's all done. And so any kind of postmortem is really not very productive. But why do we do them? And we all tend to do them. And why would I ever encourage people to actually do them? To me, it's a little bit like draining out a wound. You need to bleed it out a little bit. You need to get it out of your system. And some people might tell you, be tough, just suck it up and move on. I'm going to tell you a little bit of the opposite. I think you do have to flush it out. After you've taken the bar exam, you're hyped up. Some of you will be watching or listening to this message perhaps on your way back from the test site. And you're just ramped up. You're amped up. It's a pinnacle of the work that you've done. It's a combination of the effort you put in. It's certainly a high-stakes test, and there's a lot riding on these results. And it's only natural to want to express what that test was about for you. In fact, I think sometimes it's a danger for people to keep those emotions and those reactions bottled up. Now, if you're one of the people that truly wrote off the exam, you finished on the last day and you said, don't care, done, I'm out of here, and you never think about it again, that's awesome. You're one of the really great and well-balanced human beings. But I would say that most of us probably don't have that reaction. Most people have some mental replay that goes on. some amount of deja vu, some let's go back and see that highlight tape again that they run on their own version of Sports Center from the bar exam. And we tend to think about the exam, some more than others. Now, as I said, there's nothing wrong with thinking about the exam once it's over. That part is good, and kept to moderation, I think it's helpful. But here's where it can get dangerous. There are those people who immediately move from the replay mode into the beat myself up mode about what happened. And the most common way that I see this is a phone conference or an email or posting in the Facebook in which the person says something to the effect of, I missed the following blank issues. What's going to happen? Did I fail the bar exam? Now, if you're any kind of a listener or watcher of my work, or you're in our course, you already know what I'm going to say about this. Issues, the person that says I missed the issues on the essay or the multiple choice, whatever part it was, they were right. They did miss issues because there is no end to issues. And if you haven't heard me talk about this, here's the really brief part of it. The word issue is a lazy word. It just means a placeholder for anything that could be in there. And because we can't define what an issue is, the reality is that there's no end to those issues. It's probably the most ambiguous, ridiculous, weasel word in the legal language. It's the word of lazy people. And when somebody says, I thought that there were some issues in that problem, oh, really? What? How many were there? Maybe 1 million? Maybe 100? Maybe 50? I don't know, but more than you could ever write about. There's certainly no end to the issues. So when someone says to me, oh, I think I missed some issues, they're correct. I think the better way, however, to put it or to think about it would be, did you miss any of the major disputes or the conflicts? Because if there's a major dispute or conflict in the question, in the fact pattern, and that was something that you missed, it would be significant. But literally, how would you know which issues were important or unimportant? If all you were trying to do is to issue spot after the bar exam, that was almost as crazy as trying to issue spot into the bar exam, because in a timed test, there's simply no way for you to hit every single issue. I think the big box bar reviews and their brethren really do students an incredible disservice by saying you should issue spot in the exam, because they know full well that you can't really issue spot, not completely, not fully. You can't even figure out what that means. So you're going to torment yourself afterwards saying, did I miss the blank issue? Well, you probably did. The question really that you should be asking is, does that matter? And most of the time when I dig deeper into these issues that people think that they might have missed, it turns out that they're pretty marginal, pretty peripheral. The core major parts of the problem are pretty obvious to see. That's why they're out there. And if you wrote about those, whether you got them right or wrong, if you wrote about them, you're generally much better off. So when people start tormenting themselves about an extraneous marginal issue, that's just masochism. So the answer to the does it matter question probably is best answered by saying, was there a dispute about that part of the problem? So if there was, and you didn't address that at all, yeah, you might be in some trouble on that particular question. But if you didn't address it because it's not really a dispute, it was just something we called an issue, then stop beating yourself up. There's nothing to be gained by that, and you don't need to worry. And I want to emphasize this because a lot of people lose a lot of sleep over things that don't really matter. Now, another part of the post-mortem, the beating up, the lack of peace, is really a matter of simple mathematics. Another type of call or conference or email I get, somebody says, I think I was doing pretty well, but then I really blew the property essay or the performance test on the exam, or there were a bunch of mortgages questions on the MBE. News alert, there are not a bunch of mortgages questions. I know that will upset those of you in the Big Box Bar Review, which, by the way, for 15 years has been telling people there are a lot of mortgage questions. I don't know why. There aren't. But anyway, people go through all of this and they get really wrapped up about a specific question, whether it's on the MBE or a specific essay or whatever it might be. And then they make the illogical jump to assume that one question has kept them from passing. Now, you may have heard me say you're just one answer away, but when I talk about being one answer away, what I really mean is pushing yourself over the finish line. Now, as you do the post-mortem, I don't want you to think, oh my God, that was the one answer that kept me from passing. There is no comfort in that approach. So here's the trick. Take this one question that you're pretty sure you missed, or that series of multi-state questions that you missed, and do the math. Ask yourself, how is your particular state exam scored? What percentage of the overall score goes to the state part of the exam, and what percentage goes to the MBE? And then ask yourself within this component where you think you had problems, if I missed one of the 6 essay questions or the 5 essay questions or the PT question, if I missed that, how much of the overall score did that one question amount to? And remember that what we're talking about here is that you got a 0 or a 1 or a 2 or a 3, a low score on a 100 scale. Now, assuming you didn't just turn in a completely empty sheet of paper or upload a completely blank file, that you did something, ask yourself, given the worst case scenario, if you didn't get a 0 on it, what's your worst case score that you think you could get? Then figure out what that worst case score would be and what it represents as a percentage of the total possible score for that part of the exam. And then ask yourself, what's that total number or what the number in that essay amounts to for that part of the exam, and expand it even further. In other words, what does this number mean for the overall test? Let me give you an example. If you think that you missed 1 or 2 multiple choice questions on the MBE, maybe there was a rule against perpetuities question, and you're sure that you missed it, that might be worth 1% or maybe 2% of your MBE score. That might be worth 50% of your overall score, which means that 1% now becomes 0.5%. You begin to see how it plays out. If you think that you missed an essay, or you got some part of it, but not as much as you should, you, quote, failed an essay, that's probably somewhere on the order of 5 to 10% of your state part of the score. That's probably in most states about what it amounts to. If it's 10% of the state score and the state score is 50% of the overall, it's 5% of your overall score. So here's the interesting part to me mathematically. If you take the number of people that failed the bar exam by less than 5% of overall points, that's actually a pretty small number, very small in fact. The truth is that mathematically, the part that you missed probably didn't make much of a difference. It's the overall performance that makes a difference. Now, if you say, I blew essay 1, 3, 5, we've got a slightly different problem. But most of the time when people are beating themselves up, it's because there's a specific question on the exam that they think they missed. And that's really the point I want to make to you. If across the board you didn't know how to write or do your essays, or you didn't turn in anything on either performance test, or you didn't finish 20 questions on the multi-state, well, that's a different matter altogether. And then you can do the math and see that, in fact, you were in trouble. But I'm talking to the people who only think that they had a specific problem and a limited problem. So if you're doing a post-mortem right now in your own mind, in order to give yourself some peace, do 3 things. 1, remember that the test is actually over. There's nothing you can do about it. That's obvious. 2nd, think about what it is you're really concerned about. Were you thinking about issues or disputes? That makes a huge difference. Was it detail stuff, or were it things that you had no chance of getting to anyway? And 3rd, do the math. Just sit down and figure out, what does that amount to? What does it mean? And in most cases, you're going to see it's probably not a whole lot. I think if you do those things, you're going to find that you've got a little bit more peace as you wait for the results to come. We're going to be talking later about what to do while you're waiting for results, but here's a sneak peek. Go on with your life. Go out and do the things that you were doing before you started studying for the bar exam. If you're looking for a job, start that process. If you've got a job, go back to work. Go back to your family. Be a participant in life, whatever that means in your world. But don't sit around moping about what happened on the exam. There is no benefit to that. Some people ask me, should I start studying right away after the exam? The answer is that the postmortem will help tell you that. If you see a consistent pattern in your work in which you did not complete the work and you had problems, then you ought to consider the possibility of restarting your studies. But if you basically were in the game the whole way through and you're just beating yourself up in that typical lawyer type A way that we're so good at doing, I would hold off. I'd wait, get a little perspective, a little time lapse, and see how you're feeling in a few weeks. I hope that's helpful to you. We'll be back to you with more messages about exam peace, but also about what to do while you're waiting for your exam results to come out. And in the meantime, I hope that you have a good transition back to normal civilian, non-bar related life, and that you can begin to put this experience behind you and move on. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.